Hello, I'm Bill Bullard with RCAF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, what if there was a handful of global elitists who had their own environmental, social, and corporate agenda that they wanted to impose on food producers the world over? And what if those elitists could influence governments and control world banks that could then influence who gets operating loans to produce food? And what if those world banks, through lending policies to global beef packers, could compel those global beef packers to dictate to cattle producers the world over who gets to raise cattle and how they must raise them if they want access to a marketplace? Now, this is the stuff movies are made of. It's also the stuff that fuels conspiracy theories. But when events unfold before our very eyes, it's no longer a theory and must be accepted as reality. So let's start at the beginning. There are two types of economies, a market economy and a planned economy. In market economies, competitive forces dictate who produces food and how they produce it. It's that free and open market, with rules that prevent cheating, that is the last bastion of freedom. Thus, liberty hangs in the balance between a market economy and a planned economy. But dictating who can produce food and how they must produce it is the essence of a planned economy, one in which someone or something other than competitive market forces is in charge. Now, not long ago, the World Wildlife Fund stated that ongoing food production was among the greatest threats to the planet, and further suggested that consumers should not have a choice between purchasing food, particularly beef, that was produced in a market economy or in a planned economy. In other words, the suggestion was to force producers everywhere to comply with their vision of what constitutes environmentally and socially friendly practices. Now, the World Wildlife Fund is a leader in the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and it has members including global agricultural lenders and global beef packers. And all of them are working to achieve their collective vision for the future of food production. Now, if we stop there, then all we have is a private global corporation replete with global banks and global beef packers who are working together to achieve their agenda by using the bottleneck in the supply chain to force compliance through limits on market access. Now, that bottleneck is readily visualized in the U.S., where just 4 global beef packers control 85% of the fed cattle market. But we can't stop there, because now we have a nation's government bent on achieving the same objective, that of forcing food producers to incur production costs associated with their global vision of what constitutes sustainability. And that government appears unconcerned with the fact that small to mid-sized farming and ranching operations will likely be forced out of business. Of course, we're talking about the Netherlands, where the government is forcing Dutch farmers to cut what it views as harmful emissions in half by 2023. But large global agribusinesses will have the wherewithal to comply, and so the Dutch government's initiative will promote even more consolidation in the food production sector. It will also invite cheaper imports, particularly from countries that do not require such costly compliance. So now what once was a private global corporation that would use the marketplace to achieve compliance has now morphed into a government-controlled initiative to do the same thing, that of achieving their goal for environmental, social, and corporate governance. It's no wonder that farmers in the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, and Poland are protesting and pushing back against this effort. And now the United States Securities and Exchange Commission has jumped into the global stage. It's proposing to require publicly traded companies, like some of the world's largest beef packers, to report on their progress in achieving the global environmental and social governance standards throughout their supply chains. Now, of course, independent cattle producers make up their supply chains. So guess who will be required to incur the costs of making that progress that the Securities and Exchange Commission once reported? Now, we have to understand that this is well underway, and it's bigger than you thought. So what do we do? Well, for starters, we must denounce support for the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and we must tell Congress that the United States must not follow the Dutch toward a planned economy. But you must also begin educating the elected officials in your state. After all, our local governments may soon be all that stands in the way of a global effort to strip America's cattle farmers and ranchers of their independence and liberty. So join with us to fight this threat to our food security and independence. Go to www.r-cafusa.com to join and learn more. With that, have a productive week. Thank you and goodbye.